The FIA gets blasted for its treatment of the former race director. The British bias conversation comes up again, and Carlos's contract clause could add another twist to the silly season. Do consider subscribing. Let's get into the latest F1 news. Max Verstappen has often been in the spotlight for his aggressive style of defending his position on the racetrack. But when the situation is different and he is on the offensive, Alex Albon finds himself feeling a different kind of anxiety. While Albon and Verstappen are familiar with each other due to their time as teammates at Red Bull from 2019 to 2020, it is actually another driver who causes Albon the most concern when he sees him in his rearview mirrors. Surprisingly, this driver is not Verstappen at all, but rather Kevin Magnussen. During a conversation featured on the Motorsport.com TikTok channel, Albon was asked who he found to be the most frustrating driver to be behind on the track, especially when he is trying to make a pass. His immediate response was, "Max Verstappen, yeah," acknowledging Verstappen's reputation as a formidable and aggressive defender of his position, which is something that many drivers have noticed throughout their time racing against him. Verstappen's defensive tactics have come under significant scrutiny lately, especially after a couple of notable incidents where he was involved in on-track clashes with his closest championship rival, Lando Norris, during races in Austin and Mexico. Following those skirmishes, Verstappen received 2 separate 10-second penalties in the Mexican Grand Prix, highlighting just how contentious his approach can be. However, when it comes to drivers that Albon truly fears seeing behind him, it seems that Kevin Magnussen takes the cake. Albon clearly expressed this fear when asked directly about which driver he would dread looking back and spotting in his mirrors. He simply stated, "Kevin Magnussen, we're on track a lot together and it's always tough." In the 2024 Formula One season, Magnussen made headlines by becoming the first driver ever to face a race ban due to accumulating 12 penalty points, which are awarded under the FIA's super license system. This meant he had to sit out the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, demonstrating just how challenging he can be on the track. With only 3 races remaining in the season, Verstappen is in an incredibly strong position to claim his 4th consecutive World Championship title. He has recently widened his lead over Norris to an impressive 62 points following the Brazilian Grand Prix. Despite the competitive nature of their sport and the fierce rivalry on the track, Verstappen and Norris maintain a friendly relationship off the circuit. This current season marks the first occasion where they have been direct championship opponents against one another. After the episodes in Austin and Mexico, it was only fitting to ask Norris whether he could separate Verstappen as a person outside of racing from the driver he encounters on the track. Norris, responding to this question posed by F1 TV, admitted, "I don't know, I'm split." He mentioned how it can be difficult to reconcile someone's personality and the way they interact with others outside of the race setting with their behavior during competitive racing. He reflected, "In some ways, you kind of think how someone can be personally and how you can get along with people can be so different to how you are on track." Norris made a valid point about how being on the track creates a completely different environment compared to being in the paddock, where interactions are often more relaxed. He noted, "It's such a different world there on the track to hear doing this." As this is his first experience being in a championship battle, he acknowledged that time would reveal how his feelings and perspectives might evolve as the season unfolds. For the moment, Norris affirmed, "I still respect Max, I think he respects me, but maybe ask me again at the end of the year." Former Formula One driver Guido van der Garde holds the view that the Alpine team will experience a significant enhancement starting in 2026 as they transition to a customer power unit arrangement with Mercedes. This shift marks a notable change in strategy for Alpine, as it moves away from its existing power unit program with Renault, which had already been planned and developed. The decision to change was not without contention. Many staff members at Renault's engine facility in Viry-Châtillon expressed their dissatisfaction and protested against the closure of the F1 2026 project that was in collaboration with Renault. Despite the pushback from the workforce, the company has decided to proceed with embracing Mercedes as its engine supplier. Van der Garde has personal experience with both Renault and the competitive landscape of Formula One, having raced using Renault power during his time with the Caterham team back in 2013. He recalls visiting Renault's impressive engine base during that period, and he is quite familiar with the challenges and capabilities of various power units. Reflecting on the powerful performance Mercedes demonstrated during the last significant overhaul of power unit regulations in 2014, He believes that moving to Mercedes is a wise strategy for the Renault Group and Alpine. In his comments on the F1 Nation podcast, Van der Garde expressed his confidence in the decision, stating his belief that this shift to Mercedes is the appropriate course of action. He emphasized that Mercedes has consistently delivered strong engines. He pointed out that Mercedes had an exceptional transition from the V8 engines to V6 hybrids, particularly strong in the initial years. From his perspective, this transition represented a substantial leap forward in performance compared to competitors at the time. Van der Garde acknowledged the expertise of the engineers at Mercedes, noting that they possess the knowledge and capabilities necessary to design and produce successful power units. He is optimistic for Alpine, believing that aligning with Mercedes is the right direction for the team's future, and he is confident that they will benefit from this partnership. He also indicated that there may have already been hopes within the team to secure the Mercedes engine for the upcoming season. He remarked on the current performance issues facing the Renault or Alpine engine, which seem to persist on the racetrack. Although the engine performs adequately in qualifying sessions, it tends to lose power during the full race, as they often have to dial back the engine performance to manage reliability, resulting in a noticeable drop in performance. Van der Garde noted that the Alpine chassis has strong performance in corners, but struggles in straight-line speed, where they frequently lose ground compared to competitors. He firmly believes that switching to Mercedes engines for the 2026 season will provide a much-needed boost to the team. On the flip side, the decision was met with considerable concern from a group of workers at the Viry facility. They expressed their disapproval of the transition to Mercedes power before the official announcement, stating that the Alpine Racing Works Council had a unanimous negative opinion on the shift. They voiced their regrets and disappointment regarding the decision to move away from Renault. While Van der Garde respects the hard work that the Renault team has put into their engines, he acknowledges the necessity for the team to adapt and possibly reduce costs in response to current challenges within Formula One. He shares his admiration for the Renault facilities and their achievements, recalling that they had strong winning engines when racing with Red Bull. Van der Garde noted that during his time with Caterham, the car was not particularly competitive, and he had his share of struggles while driving it, but he learned valuable lessons through those experiences. He remarked on the scale and professionalism of the operations at the factory and understands the pressures that come with racing at this level. He concluded by reiterating his belief that Alpine must continue to evolve, save costs, and consider new strategies. He remains convinced that collaborating with Mercedes is the right path for Alpine moving forward. David Coulthard has weighed in on the recent chatter about biases within the media, sharing his thoughts via an amusing Tesco-based analogy. A spotlight has been shown on perceived biases within Formula One in recent weeks, following on from comments made by Max Verstappen in the wake of controversial on-track incidents in the United States and Mexico. Verstappen made his comments following a spate of criticism in the wake of his approach to battles with championship rival Lando Norris in 2 successive weekends in Austin and Mexico. Picking up 2 hefty time penalties for aggressive racing in the Mexican Grand Prix, his actions triggered negative commentary from several prominent pundits, such as Damon Hill questioning whether fair racing is within Verstappen's repertoire. Further criticism from FIA steward Johnny Herbert, who was involved on the stewarding panel that awarded Verstappen his penalties, led the reigning world champion to single Herbert out for perceived bias, and said of his critics that he pays no attention to those individuals. With Verstappen making a point to question the attendance, or lack thereof, of the British media in the press conference in Brazil, it cast a further spotlight on the topic of bias within the media. David Coulthard, while a Red Bull ambassador to this day, is well known for his balanced commentary through his work with Channel 4, willing to single out or criticize any driver or team performance as he sees fit, and the Scot addressed the question of parking allegiances as he spoke at the Red Bull show run in Galway, Ireland. The people that are normally talking about bias are the ones who are hearing praise for their not-favorite driver. I get it, he told PlanetF1.com. I don't decide who wins races. I really don't care who wins the race in as much. Just entertain me. Show me brilliance. Lewis Hamilton at his brilliant best, you go, ladies and gentlemen, there are very little words needed to be put to that picture. You've just witnessed something special. Charles or Max or whoever it is. Coulthard came up with an amusing analogy, comparing the situation to the ongoing row on the Hebridean island of Lewis, on which locals are protesting the opening on Sundays of a Tesco supermarket. I watched a thing on the news this morning about Lewis, the Scottish island. And today, Tesco's is opening on a Sunday on one of these small Scottish islands, Coulthard said. There are only 7,000 people on the island, and they got 3,000 signatures complaining about Tesco opening. They went round to people being interviewed, and some people are going, "I'm not bothered." You know, if people want to go to Tesco's on a Sunday, they can. Then there was a couple who'd moved there 4 years ago from Yorkshire, and she was like, "I'm really angry about it because we moved here because this island's quiet, and we don't want the noise of a Tesco's being open." So the minority very often are pied off by the majority's indifference or whatever. So you may be predisposed to liking carrots and not onions, and if someone puts onions on the table and you're like, "Oh, I don't like them," suffer in silence. The people who like onions, let them have them on the table. Coulthard summed up his point by saying that, in the majority of cases, the crux of the issue lies in the respective fandoms, in that they might not like to hear a rival praised due to tribalistic support. I know that for those who see me as being sort of anti-Lewis, bearing in mind I've worked with Lewis since he was a wee boy at McLaren, and I'm not at all anti-Lewis. But if he does brilliant, I praise him, he said. If he does an average job, I've got to say that's not what we expect from us. You know, the facts don't lie. The data shows whether someone's done a good job or not. This is one of those things that goes on forever. The minute somebody says something other than absolute praise for their favorite driver, you're being biased. Actually, I see my responsibility as being to report the facts, and then if it's a 50-50, or is that a driver incident, or is that a penalty, to give my opinion. But the reality is my opinion doesn't sway the stewards. The stewards give their decision. Sometimes I go, "Yep, that seems about fair." Sometimes I go, "What are they smoking? How can they give a penalty for that?" Because I've seen racing through a visor, and I've obviously seen it through the telly, but that doesn't mean I'm right. So therefore, when they've made the decision, I go, "Well, it's not what I would have done, but the referee's decision is final." Red Bull has been urged by ex-F1 racer Martin Donnelly to seal a deal for Carlos Sainz, who he claims has an exit clause in his Williams deal. Despite signing a multi-year Red Bull contract extension earlier in the year, Perez's future at Red Bull has been a long-running talking point of the F1 2024 campaign. He remained in the RB20 after the summer break following intense exit speculation, with the talk not calming down as the season approaches its conclusion. Perez has not made the podium since April's Chinese Grand Prix and finds himself P8 in the Drivers' Championship standings, while Red Bull has slipped to third in the Constructors' Championship, and Red Bull has been advised to make a driver change. Sainz has the experience, Donnelly, a 13-time starter in F1, urged when speaking with RN365. He is currently winning races in a car that perhaps is good in qualifying, but in other races they disappeared. However, Sainz already has his long-term future sorted, having agreed a multi-year deal with Williams after his Ferrari exit was enforced by the signing of Lewis Hamilton, who joins for F1 2025. Nonetheless, Donnelly claims that does not bar Red Bull from bringing the Spaniard, who began his F1 career at Toro Rosso, back into the fold. He has a clause in his contract that if any of the big teams like Red Bull, like Mercedes, came calling for him, he could come out of that and jump into the seat, Donnelly claimed. Donnelly believes Sainz would give Red Bull what their rivals McLaren and Ferrari, Sainz's current team, have now in a driver pairing, where both are contributing effectively to the constructors' title push. "If I'm looking for my driver and I want my car in the right area of being developed going forward, I'm taking Sainz," Donnelly continued. And more importantly for Red Bull, getting consistent constructors' points, because that's where they're being let down by Sergio. You have got two good drivers at McLaren who are consistently getting points, and also at Ferrari. That's why Red Bull is third in the constructors' points. The teams race for the Constructors' Championship because that's where they get the big money. They are not necessarily racing for the Drivers' Championship because they don't get any money for that. While Sainz is under Ferrari contract until the end of 2024, Williams has announced an early start to their alliance with the Spaniard, who has been cleared by Ferrari to represent Williams in the Abu Dhabi F1 2024 postseason test. This will see Sainz get behind the wheel of Williams' current FW46 challenger at the Yas Marina circuit. This early opportunity allows both Carlos and Williams to begin building their relationship together ahead of next term, said Williams via their official website. The test session at Yas Marina Circuit will provide a valuable chance for the Spaniard to start integrating into his new team environment when he drives the FW46 for the first time. Christian Danner says he was shocked and appalled by the FIA's split with race director Niels Wittich after 3 years of service. The German parted ways with the FIA to pursue new opportunities in an announcement out of nowhere from the governing body, with Wittich later quoted as telling Motorsport magazine that he had not resigned. With uncertainty over whether or not Wittich was indeed pushed or stepped aside of his own volition, what is certain is that the FIA is starting afresh with a new race director for the final 3 races of the F1 2024 championship. Wittich shared the role with Eduardo Freitas in 2022, but following the latter's own split with the FIA after the events of the 2022 Japanese Grand Prix, Wittich has made the role his own. The German was not the only departure from the F1 governing body last week, with compliance officer Paolo Basari also leaving. The BBC reported that Basari had lost the confidence of FIA President Mohammed Ben Sulayem. Former F1 driver turned analyst Christian Danner took to Motorsport magazine this week to write an impassioned column in which he outlined being shocked, appalled, and extremely surprised by the split with Wittich, who is an exposed personality. "This job is not without its challenges," Danner wrote. "You have an incredible amount of responsibility. Not everyone can do it under the pressure here. You have to make decisions in the interests of the sport and safety. The dismissal is dramatic because Formula One race directors don't grow on trees. They are plants that have been cultivated over many years. For me, there is only one conclusion. Sacking a flawless race director without justification is not only scandalous in itself, it is also decidedly unfinished business. Who is supposed to keep growing back?" Danner pointed out that even the highly rated Freitas, an expert in the World Endurance Championship category, was not without his missteps as he settled into the role in 2022, his first year in F1 as he and Wittich rotated the gig between them. Wittich has been succeeded by Rui Marcus for the final triple header of F1 2024, a baptism of fire as he has never done an F1 race before, all at a time when both championships remain undecided. Marquez boasts a background in Formula 2 and Formula 3 and headed up the administration of last weekend's Macau Grand Prix, but Danner questioned why there was a need for change at all. "We had someone who could do it and acted flawlessly. Of course, there is debate about the job because everyone has their own opinion," he said. "For some, a red flag is bad, for others, it's good. But the bottom line is that this is exactly what the race director has to do. Make an objectively correct decision regardless of subjective driver, team, and press opinions. I'm still a driver at heart, and that's why I know how it feels. You always feel unfairly treated and complain about the race director." That is one of Niels Wittich's strengths. He was completely impartial. He was a strong race director who didn't interpret the rule book, but implemented it one-to-one. I have already spoken about young talent.
Even if there were suitable candidates, who would do this job with all this stress if you can simply be fired no matter how good you are? With Wittich and Basari merely the latest in a spate of high-profile departures over the past 18 months, Danner said he suspects Ben Sulayem isn't thick-skinned, leading to discord within the ranks.
There's the way our sports authority communicates. They simply present fait accompli, which then don't quite correspond to the truth. It's no wonder that 1 or 2 people ask questions, Danner said. You can't just fire someone, even in business, because you think you don't like their nose anymore. If it was decided by a committee, you would need arguments, but there weren't any. My first thought was the letter from the GPDA. But it wasn't about the race director, it was about the president. Perhaps he has developed a certain thin-skinnedness. Distracting attention from problems is no reason to fire the race director. In view of the fact that there are actually no real newcomers, I think this is a fatal mistake by the FIA. It is an unnecessary destabilization of the overall system. That is it for this video. I'll see you around.